research to frameworks to teaching our social thinking vocabulary and connecting those. We'll talk about how social thinking guides us to learning social skills. I'll define and go through the 4 steps of perspective taking, the 4 steps of communication, and thinking about how we are aware of our body. Is it in the group? Is it out of the group? And thinking with our eyes. Those are just a couple of the vocabulary that will be covered in this particular section. Hi, I'm Pam Crook, and I'm going to be talking to you about some of our key social thinking vocabulary today. Not only the vocabulary, I'm going to be adding some strategies alongside that vocabulary so that hopefully by the time you finish this module or this series of modules, you'll have some strategies that you can walk into your classroom or into your group and you can start implementing right away. I have this packet of paper because this happens to be very important for this module or this series of modules. It's the extra handout packet or the additional handout packet. You should be able to download this within the e-learning series right now. If you haven't already done that, you might want to do it because I'll be referring to it. Not only that, there are a couple of activities here. You can also just pull it up as a PDF on your screen if you want to be able to refer to it. But definitely this is key in this particular module, and again, this series of modules. Okay, so today we're going to be thinking about treatment strategies and frameworks. They're going to go together, and these are ideas that you can use really with all students. They're being used in general education classrooms, they're being used in small groups, but the reality is we're thinking about those kids who are just struggling with some sort of social, either social cognitive or social skill or social learning. How all of those, you're going to hear all of those terms in the literature and even from us as we talk about how do we help our kids get better compared to themselves. And that's really important because as we're talking about any sort of intervention, the way that we really start thinking about outcomes, it's all about where did the child start and where are they now. We're really not we're not curing anything. We're not trying to fix because our kids are not broken. We're just trying to help all kids, all people get better compared to themselves. So kind of keep that in mind when you're working with your students with social learning challenges, that it's really not about moving that student or that child to grade level that really makes no sense for a lot of our kids, but rather knowing where they start and then knowing where they are as we teach them new concepts, strategies, and skills. All right, so I think one of the things that we do in schools and certainly that we do in private practice is we write goals, we write objectives, and we think about percentages, and that makes a lot of sense for a lot of skills and a lot of outcomes. Well, as we're talking about outcomes, it does make some sense, but what does it really mean when you're thinking about something as dynamic as social competency? It's the back and the forth, the input and the output, the interpretation, the response. It's a variety of things all going together into a very complicated package, and so this is what we really want you to walk away with, that teaching social competencies involves social skills, but it is super complex. So be mindful, again, as you're working with your student, that yes, we're going to need to write goals and objectives, of course, but being very clear and having realistic expectations for where your student will be when in the treatment process. That, as I mentioned, we're not trying to get to the 100% mark. That really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. In fact, one of the things we often talk about is one of the goals, and I fell into this trap as well. You write that goal because you have a student who struggles with eye contact, one of the social skills we hear about so often. And so we write this goal, the student will have 80% eye contact with other students. And if you think about, in fact, try this sometime. Try to have 80%, try to have eye contact with the person 80% of the time. And I can guarantee you, you are going to get creeped out. They're going to get creeped out. It's not what we do. So, I don't know, just be mindful as you're thinking about what are outcomes, what's social competency, where is the student now, and where do we want them to be? Which leads me to what is social thinking. Now, you've probably already watched a couple of modules, maybe you've been to some conferences where we talk about what is social thinking, what are social skills, and it doesn't hurt to continue to talk about the fact that social thinking is not a skills-based approach. It involves social skills for sure, but we're going to encourage social learning. We're going to, with the outcome, of course, which is social competencies. So we're going to merge all of those together. And the reality is, it's complex. And so we're going to take a little bit of time to think about what does that mean to teach social skills more deeply, and how does that relate to social thinking? And what is social thinking? Well, it's a methodology. It's not one approach. It's not one cookbook. It's not a page by page curriculum. It's a methodology. There are a lot of pieces to it, and in fact, we have several definitions. And I'll start with the long-winded version. Um, so obviously, if you're trying to define this, this is not something you're going to say to a parent or to a principal or really to anybody, because it's just long and convoluted. But this really is the kind of the academic definition of social thinking, and that is that it's a language and it's a cognitive based methodology. It focuses on the dynamic and the synergistic nature of both interpretation, so what's going in, and social communication and social problem solving. We're thinking about social attention. You're probably going to hear this quite a bit: social attention, interpretation or the meaning maker, decision making, problem solving, and then social response. Those are all parts of the methodology, and you're going to hear this a lot in our e-learning modules and our live conferences as we talk about social competency. We use cognitive behavior therapy, we use parts of behaviorism, we actually use pieces of mindfulness. All of those roll together, and we take what we know from the evidence, from the literature, and we pull it all together into some concepts, some conceptual frameworks. We turn them into treatment or strategy-based frameworks. We turn them into curricula. We turn them into motivational developmental tools, and then we send them off to you in a big package methodology. Obviously, again, there's a lot. It's a lot. So let's break it down a little bit further. And this idea of what is the ability to think social or social thinking, and that is the ability to consider your own and others' thoughts, emotions, beliefs, intentions, knowledge, etc. You're thinking about theirs, you know what yours are, and you're going to use this information to help you interpret and respond. So input and then output. Input in your mind, output through your behavioral skills, and perhaps through the way you use your social skills. By the way, sometimes social skills don't mean that you're actually doing something. Sometimes social skills means that you don't do something. You hold back. You don't make that comment. You don't make that action. You don't make that move. So that's one of the distinctions that we're going to make, is that it's not always about actually producing a skill. Sometimes it's both, not producing a skill. But I have to say, the one that I think makes the most sense is this idea of, kind of sums it up, and that is it's the ability to share space effectively. Now think about that for a second. If social thinking and related social skills, if it's the ability to share space effectively, well, that makes a lot of sense, because if I'm sharing space effectively, that means it's based on the people and it's based on the situation. So I have to be thinking about all of those. Take, for example, if you travel to a different part of the world, and you don't know anything about the social norms, you have no idea. It's a different culture, it's a different language. Well, how do you figure out how to share space effectively? Because the reality is, many of us kind of shift seamlessly across different social landscapes because we're able to adapt and figure out how to share space effectively? Well, we do that by being social detectives. We observe, we figure out what are the hidden rules, we adapt our behavior based on the people in the situation. So I really like that. I like the term, I like the phrase of, that social thinking is the ability to adapt and share space effectively. And think flexibly. And one of the things that I am hoping that you all will do as you're watching this module is that you will be flexible and think flexibly when you're looking at the handouts that you have. So you're going to have, downloadable PowerPoints, and then you're going to have these extra handouts. And in your PowerPoints, we tend to pull out, video clips, because I'm going to be showing you some video clips. And if I put those into a paper handout, then it's just like a black square. So I remove those so that you just are able to watch what's on the screen, and it's not a waste of paper. But I have to say, one of the things that people get really inflexible about is the fact that the paper in front of them doesn't match the PowerPoint exactly that you see on the screen. It's going to be very, very close. Just stay calm, self-regulate around it, and know that you're going to get all of the content, even if you don't have every single slide. All right, so back to the idea of social thinking. So we know now it's a methodology, but it's not for everyone. This, because it's language based and because it's cognitive based, that means we're going to be really focusing on a very distinct group of kids or adults, and those are folks who are have pretty solid language level and solid cognitive abilities. And sometimes people will ask me, wait a second, why that's not fair, why not allow all kids to access your materials? And the reality is, and, and for those of you familiar with some of the social thinking tools and strategies, our stuff is so heavily language loaded. We use language to talk about thinking. We use thinking to think about language. So the thinking and the language are so intertwined that now if you put this in front of a child who has very limited language or really has challenges with cognitive skills, you're frustrating them and you're going to frustrate yourself. So be wary as you're thinking about who are you going to use some of these tools and strategies with, and know your kid and know where they are and know where you want them to go, and just be savvy consumers of our materials. So sometimes people will say, well, social thinking, that's for the kids with autism. Well, actually, the autism community has really embraced social thinking, but social thinking tools and strategies are for a variety of diagnoses, including, ASD, sure, but we work with a lot of students who have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity, or ADD, social communication disorder. It used to be on the autism spectrum. We had Asperger's and PDD, and we've gone through all sorts of iterations in terms of how we label or diagnose kids. But now we have ASD levels 1, 2, 3, and then we have this sort of other category that we call social communication disorder. That's when the diagnosis of autism has been ruled out, but it's very clear there's still something that's going on with that particular student. So that's social communication disorder. It's part of the DSM-5, but it's still one of those that people are tiptoeing around trying to figure out, what is that? I can guarantee you that if you see a child who has a diagnosis of a social communication disorder, they're probably a great candidate for social thinking tools and strategies. Also, nonverbal learning disorder, gifted and talented, twice exceptional. We see a lot of kids who are very, very academically smart, but socially may have challenges. FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome, perhaps. Certainly, we see an overlap with many, many mental health diagnoses. A lot of our kids come in with dual diagnoses and with mental health on top of something else. Brain injury, behavioral ODD, oppositional defiant. We certainly see some of those kids. And we're seeing a big uptake in our methodology for those in the general ed classroom. So those kids who are undiagnosed, or we would say maybe who are a little neurodiverse, maybe they're a little bit different, or have no diagnosis whatsoever. They're just struggling with how to take in this social information. So again, this is a methodology. That's for a lot. It's a wide range, but it's really not for all kids. And when I say be very wary of that, we ask you to be really cautious. So let's take it one step deeper, though. Let's think a little bit more about the methodology, and maybe this will help you as you're thinking about the particular student you have in front of you and whether or not they would be a good candidate. We're going to be thinking about social competency. So not about just a behavior and a skill. For instance, a behavior and a skill would be, greeting hi, or politeness saying thank you, or knowing how close or how far to stand next to someone. Those are skills. We're actually working on something bigger. We're working on what we call, social competency. And in another module, you're going to be hearing about our social thinking, social competency model, and the fact that it involves the interconnection of four really key areas. And everything that I'm going to be talking about for the next little while will revolve around these areas, including social attention, being able to understand what you're attending to, social interpretation, which is your meaning maker. I can observe it, but I got to be able to make meaning of it. Then I have to make a decision based on the information that I have. So we're going to call that social problem solving or social decision making. And then, and keep in mind, this is all input now. And I'm observing my attention, I'm interpreting, I'm making decision and problem solving, and now I have output. And the output can be it could be a social skill, it could be academics, social academics or academics. It could be in your language, it could be in your verbal language or your nonverbal language. That's the output. So you hear input and output and social competency. I'll play a couple of videos here, at least one for you, so you can think about. So think about social attention, interpreting, making meaning of what's going on. Now I'm going to make a decision on what to do, and then I have my output. So keep that in mind. Also, just wanted to mention very quickly, Michelle and I just wrote an article, and it's on our website, and I've included the hyperlink at the bottom of your of the screen. And this is a discussion of the social competency model so that you can get a better idea for those of you who want to go a little deeper. All right, keep in mind those four areas while I play this short clip.
Hey, dude. You got to get down. Come on.
So here we have this great clip of a guy. He's just trying to do something really nice. He's putting together a dinner for his wife or his girlfriend, and getting everything just so. And of course she comes home. We've got we've introduced a couple of characters here, and she comes through the door. He, of course, is holding a cat, a very long knife. There's a pile of red on the floor, and her attention immediately goes to what she sees are the key details. Cat, knife, pile of apparently, blood. Who knows, right? So she comes in. Now, she has to quickly take that in. She's interpreting that information. She is now just making a decision about, like, what in the world is happening. Now, if that clip were to continue to play, probably what you would see is she would react with her language. Wow, what's going on? And of course, she's having all sorts of thoughts at the same time. She's like, what are you doing? He's having thoughts, by the way. He's also attending to her. He's interpreting what he's seeing. He sees the look on her face. He's got to make a quick decision. Oh my gosh, I have a cat and a knife in my hand. He's problem solving, and his response would probably be, I'm not hurting your cat, etc. So there's a lot that's going on back and forth. And it's happening very quickly. Now, when I show this exact clip to some of my clients, and I've shown it to many clients across the ages, And some of the questions that I'll have are things like, hey, do you think that's, Prego or ragu sauce? Or how long do you think the blade is on that knife? Or so, and that's right at the very beginning. That's the social attention piece. If you're cueing into those sorts of details, then that's going to drive the interpretation and the problem solving and decision making that you do in order to make this response. So that first level, that social attention is key because it's driving your interpretation, your problem solving, and your responding. And again, it happens so incredibly quickly that in real time, you think about kids walking down the hallway, you think about kids in the classroom, they're often tuning into the wrong thing. So they're interpreting, their problem solving, they're responding in the wrong manner. Very powerful. Keep in mind, keep that as you're thinking through this whole process of what we're teaching when we teach social competency. And social competency counts. A really interesting study was done in 2015 by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, where they looked at 20 years of data. 20 years of data. They looked at, 5-year-old kids and then looked at them at 25. And they were looking at kind of social skills and social competencies at 5 years old. And did that predict anything in terms of future development? And what they found is that kids who had higher competency in things like sharing and cooperating and helping other people, they ended up having higher education 20 years later and better jobs versus kids who had lower competency scores. They tended to end up being more isolated. They dropped out of school. They tended to get into problems with drug and were more likely to um, be on government assistance. Now, so the way they conducted this study is in kindergarten, they had like a 5 point scale. And what they found is that for every 1 point increase on this 5 point scale, so each time 1 point went up, kids were twice as likely to have a college degree in adulthood. By the way, this 5 point scale was all around social competencies. They were 54% more likely to have a high school diploma and 46% more likely to have a full time job. For every 1 point decrease, so you start taking these points down, for every 1 point decrease, there were 67% higher chance of having been arrested, an 82% chance of recent marijuana use, and then an 82% higher chance of being in or waiting on government housing, public housing. I provided the link here on your handout so that you can go check it out. But I think it's really important because it's telling us the critical nature of social. If for no other reason you think about, okay, wait a minute, long-term outcomes are if you have better social skills, you're gonna have a better shot of being a more self-sufficient, independent adult. Let's use that. I mean, that's a great logic for why we need to put some emphasis on social skills and social learning. So pause for a minute and consider what term you and your colleagues use to describe what it is you do when you're teaching social or social abilities. Are you using the term social skills? Are you using the term social competencies? And actually, what is it that you're teaching towards? So think about that for a minute.